So I would say it was more 2021 than 2020 because obviously we know what happened in 2020.
Sure.
There was a mass hiring for IT professionals, right? Because everyone was going remote. Like within months, our professional environment changed drastically, right? And so they needed people to help support telecommuting. We had candidates who had multiple offers, ghosted companies, ghosted recruiters, didn't ever get back to them, held, 2 or 3 offers in their hand while they were weighing it out and did not communicate. So they behaved pretty badly, right? You have recruiters hounding candidates, you have companies hounding candidates to be like, hey, did you take a look at our offer? And candidates were able to ask far above, market value for what their roles were. So there was like a hiring spree, right? Now we're seeing the opposite effect, right? Everyone's getting laid off. There's not enough jobs on the market. I shouldn't say that. There are jobs on the market, right? But there's just a surplus of professionals that are also on the market. And so now companies are the tables have turned, right? Companies have an influx of applicants. They can't possibly get to every single person, right? So I think it's kind of like there's a peak, there's a valley, right? And it just depends on who's on which end of it. It's the whole thing about taking rejection gracefully, right? If you go to a company and said, I haven't heard from you, this is unprofessional, how dare you guys not respond to any of your candidates that have interviewed or applied, that's not going to get you anywhere. Same thing if the companies came to a candidate and said, hey, how dare you, how unprofessional, I can't believe you haven't accepted our offer yet or given us an answer, right? So it's kind of, it's twofold, right? At one point, one person's experiencing that, and the other point, the companies are experiencing that. So I think it all comes back to, handling rejection gracefully, handling multiple offers gracefully. That's a whole nother topic that I'm sure we could dive into.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Job Seeker's Journey podcast. Today's episode is part 2 of my conversation with Amy Herr, where we discuss more about finding different types of jobs, finding the quote unquote hidden job market, different avenues to find that next job opportunity. It is a great conclusion to part 1 of our conversation, which came out last week. If you haven't listened to that, I highly encourage you to go and listen to that episode. But this is part 2 where we dive a little bit deeper and I talk a little bit longer with Amy. And I've been trying to figure out how do I describe Amy to the listeners and what she is to me. Because the truth of the matter is she's a friend of a friend. She was recommended to me by someone else who had come on the podcast. I met her with the expectation of liking her, but potentially not hearing much from her after we recorded our episode. But that isn't the case. Amy's a kind-hearted person who genuinely took a liking to me, took a liking to this podcast, and took a liking to my career goals, and has stayed around and stayed in touch. And I cannot tell you how much I appreciate that from her and how wonderful I feel that she is based on that fact alone. She's introduced me to other people that'll be coming on the podcast. She's introduced me to a company that she's started that, potentially I could help with. She's an amazing person. And I know you're going to enjoy the rest of this conversation. So here is part 2 of my conversation with Amy Herr. Well, let's do one more. And I think this one is probably one that happens the most. And if you're observant and you're present, you'll probably notice that this happens the most. I know when my wife and I moved where we are now, we are just south of a really affluent area. So there's a lot of people that go to the same Starbucks we do, that go to the same gyms that we do, that are high in companies and things like that. And you do get a chance to just meet people. So the last scenario I think would be great to talk about is that random person that you come across at a gym, at a coffee shop, at Walmart, whatever the situation is, and you just start talking to them about whatever, and then you find out what they do and who they are, and you want to try to build that relationship more. What do you think the approach is there? It's probably similar to LinkedIn, but it could even be a little bit more casual because you are already face to face and you're building a rapport about whatever you're doing at that particular moment.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it doesn't happen as often anymore, especially this day and age. Maybe 10, 15 years ago, I feel like people were more willing to engage with each other in public. But I do have a recent story of a similar situation where I was on a flight on my way to a conference, and the person who sat next to me, seemingly nice person. I don't usually talk to people on the plane. I'm usually working, or I take advantage of, the time to maybe take a nap, squeeze in a nap. And we just started chatting. And usually when that happens, that tells you that the other person is open and willing, right? So you take that opportunity and you just, be authentic, active listening, be curious, just start asking questions. And lo and behold, this person, him and I, we spoke for an hour or two on the flight, and then didn't really talk the rest of the flight. But then right at the end, we're like, hey, let's swap, social information, right? So LinkedIn. And then a month or two later down the road, he reached back out to me to say, hey, you remember that thing that we were talking about on the plane? I think I might have something for you, right? And so I think it's just leaving it very fluid, just giving each other a way to still get in touch with each other, right? But not being too aggressive unless there is an actionable item, right? So like say if in that initial conversation, you did know someone and how can you give to them, right? And that's what you should be listening for in those random situations too, is how can you give to them what they're, looking for? Because then that gives you a good follow-up, right? And vice versa. Maybe they're a really great network and they're listening to what they can give you, right? And they follow up with you. So I think, it goes both ways, but the things that you can control, right, is listening, looking for that opportunity to give them something, because then that gives you an opportunity to, reach back out for the follow-up. And then if it, is reciprocated, then it's going to be a back and forth, like tossing the ball back and forth to each other, right? And then eventually you end up playing basketball together. I don't know. Right. Trying to find a good analogy, but that was terrible.
No, that was good. That makes sense. I think it's interesting how if you just stay present, you probably meet more people that can help you than you even know. And the thing that I've come to is that there are more people that are willing to help you than you think, and are willing to meet you and are interested in you, even if you don't think that they are or think that they would be. So it's important to take the chance. And yeah, the worst you may hear is no. But that's not the end of the world. And you took your shot. And it just didn't work out this time, but it doesn't mean your strategy was bad. It doesn't mean that you were awkward or weird or whatever. Maybe you caught them at a bad time, and maybe you meet them again a week or two later and they're in a better spot. And then they're like, hey, I remember you wanted to ask me something. What do you want to ask me? Or whatever, Yeah. And I think that's really cool. But I think now's a good time for us to pivot just a little bit. You and I have talked about a lot of different things over the course of our conversations, and they've all been really good. In fact, we've joked that we probably have a series of episodes we could do over different things. But I wanted to try to take a little bit of a pivot and talk a little bit about the market that we're in today. Everybody has said, and I do believe this to be true, that the market is harder now than it has been in the past for many different reasons. Back in 2015, LinkedIn was huge in finding a job. And it was one of the best ways to find a job. And applying to a job, companies were looking at those resumes, responding to those resumes. I got a job in 2015 through LinkedIn. Same with 2020. I got a job through LinkedIn and applying to a job. But that is seemingly not the same now. The numbers of people that are applying to every job, whether it's real or fake, and fake applications are high. Companies can't look at every application that comes in. It's impossible. It's almost like you're playing the lottery if you are putting in an application on a job board nowadays. So it's becoming more and more important to find different avenues, such as networking, to try to find that next opportunity. And the term that always gets used is the hidden job market. And which is can be a frightening term because, you hear hidden and you're going, what the heck? How do I access that? Is that for other people? Like, what does that mean? But what are some of the different just avenues that you've seen to help find that next opportunity?
Yeah. I mean, I've always been big on continuous education, right? No one's perfect. As you start learning more, you realize how much you don't know, right? So, it goes back to that whole being curious thing. Stay curious, right? Keep learning. And as you are going through that process, oftentimes you're running into people who may be looking for that skill set or might be trying to learn the same thing because they need someone who can do that, right? Or someone else who maybe has been a tenured person in the company. Now they're trying to upskill, and mainly because they probably need to pick up some new responsibilities. And then you meet that person, they're like, oh my gosh, you'd be great for another position that's opening, right? So I think continuous education is typically a good door opener for lots of good conversations, opportunities. You really never know who you're going to meet by going through that process because it's, and it needs to be like coupled with networking too, right? So say for instance, if someone's trying to do a career pivot and they take a boot camp in coding, right? But they don't do any networking with it. So where does that leave them, right? They're still a project manager with now a bootcamp coding certification, but nothing else that they can do from it besides just say the habit, right? But if you are going on this bootcamp, you're networking with your classmates, you're networking with your professor, right? Because every course has a teacher, right? And so if you're networking with that teacher, they might know people who are looking, right? They might be keeping an eye out for promising students to pass along. So it needs to be like kind of a 2-in-1 thing, continuous learning, but then also networking as you're going along. And I feel like there's a lot of hidden opportunities in those types of environments. And I mean, I think also just, even just from the continuous education point with your own, like physical and mental health, a lot of times that opens doors because if there's other people that are going through the same process, they're working on their physical and mental health. You don't know who else you might run into that's going through the same journey. So it's, opening up the doors with, your own self-improvement, right? But then also networking along the way, building the relationships along the way, finding battle buddies, because that usually will open up doors for you.
Sure. Yeah. And, if you try to put yourself in the shoes of that company and if you have the ability to almost turn the camera around and look at yourself as a potential employer, and you start to think of what would I look like to a potential employer if I do one of two things. If I either take the time to improve myself over the course of this transition, whether that be I take some courses on what I do. So for myself, it's project management. So if I'm continually learning about new methods of project management, new ways of thinking of project management, if maybe I've always been in IT and I'm moving and I'm hoping to get into construction. Well, okay, if I didn't do any kind of research on construction and know the terminology in construction and not be able to speak to it intelligently, then what does that look like to a potential employer when they're interviewing you? Or if you've done absolutely nothing and you've just been applying and kind of feeling bad for yourself and you're, blaming everybody else. And how does that come across whenever you're sitting there at an interview? What does that look like to them? And trying to put yourself in their shoes a little bit will help with, hey, I can really improve my economic value to a company if I do this, if I learn this, if I take a chance on this, if I do work for go volunteer somewhere and I donate some of my time and I'm making things about other things than just me. So I think it's such an important thing that you said there. I mean, trying to turn it around and objectively look at yourself and say, how can I improve? Do I need to get to the gym? Do I need to talk to a counselor and work on my emotions and work on my mental stability because I've just went through something that's pretty traumatic and I'm trying to get back to having confidence and those kind of things.
I mean, you mentioned traumatic, and I do have to point out that the job search process itself is very traumatizing, let alone the whole, reason why you're probably looking for a job, whether you're laid off, you were let go, the company closed down, the company sold, right? It's a very traumatic experience. And it's incredibly difficult to come out of that victim mindset if you're not self-aware and you're not reframing your mindset to say, okay, this is an opportunity to do something different, or this is an opportunity for me to invest some time in myself, or this is an opportunity to focus on upskilling, right? Or an opportunity to try something new and fail and try again, right? So I think that's really an interesting word that you use with trauma.
Yeah. And I know that word probably gets overused nowadays. Everybody calls everything trauma, but it really is traumatic to lose a job. In fact, it's been said that it's just under losing a loved one in terms of the amount of trauma that you can experience, especially if it's your first job. You put all your identity into it. You have this notion of, I'm just going to consistently rise, and then you get a setback, which most people do. And that setback can really mess with you if you allow it to. But I love the way you said reframing it and taking ownership of your situation and being able to look at things objectively and say, I may have contributed here, not blame yourself for the fact that you got let go, because a lot of times it's factors that you can't control. But, here's where I could have been better. And then you have an opportunity to get better for the next one. And I think that's really cool. But you mentioned this just a second ago, and I think it's really important for us to spend some time on the biggest thing you're going to deal with when going through a job search, unless you're extremely lucky and the first time you do an interview, they love you, you love them, everything's kumbaya, is you're going to deal with rejection. And you're already dealing with rejection, especially if you're a part of a mass layoff. You get let go and you're the only one that gets let go, whatever that is, you're dealing with rejection from the beginning. But in your opinion, what is the way to really try to deal with that rejection as it comes?
Yeah, it's tough because in the moment, right, you're feeling probably an overwhelming number of emotions, which could be, oh, my self-worth is, I'm not worthy, or it could be anger, it could be sadness. But the best thing you can do is to receive it as gracefully as possible, right? Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been wonderful working with you. I hope that if there's an opportunity to work it together again in the future, that you would consider me. You can even say things like, "Hey, let's stay in touch. I would love to continue learning from you and keeping our relationship, afterwards, even though I'm leaving the company, right?" I think receiving rejection as gracefully as you can, and sometimes it may be you need to take a beat. You need to walk away, go for a walk, do something different, and then come back and write the email or write the response or have the conversation. But don't burn the bridge, right? Leave it intact. Just be as graceful as you can with receiving the rejection. Even if it's, say you're interviewing and someone says, "Hey, we went with another candidate. Thank you for your time. Thank you so much for, the time that you guys took to meet me. I really enjoyed the process, really enjoyed meeting, you and the hiring managers. If there's any follow-up questions you have, feel free to reach out to me directly. You can ask them for feedback, but don't expect feedback in return. If they do give it to you, it's a wonderful thing, and it makes, for me, it gives the company extra bonus points, right? But more often than not, just expect no response back. But if someone does, give you a response, an HR person or the recruiter, I think it's really worthwhile to then turn that into an opportunity then to build that relationship with them and network with them, right? Because you never know, you may not be right for this role for who knows what reason. I always say if you don't get a job, it's a blessing in disguise, right? Because usually there's insider information that the hiring manager knows or the team knows, like, oh, this manager is really abrasive and that person is not going to work well, with this abrasive manager, or vice versa, right? So you never know what could be happening behind the scenes. So just receive it as gracefully as you can and then turn it into opportunities to network and build that relationship.
Yeah. I had a guest on here a few weeks ago. Her name was Jessica, and she has a term that I think actually can apply to this, and she calls it delusionally confident. And in some ways, I feel like you can do that. And even if they tell you no, that they said no, but in your mind, you can tell yourself they said not right now. And you never know. Maybe they call you back later on. Maybe they rethought it and thought, that's at that point, I didn't think he was right, but I really liked him. And so if we have something else, I'd really like to call him later. And then having that in your mind of, they didn't just tell me no, even if they did, but tell yourself that they didn't. Say it's not right now, or something of that nature, so that you can kind of move on and be like, okay, well then that just wasn't right for me, but who knows, maybe I'll hear from him again. And then you can kind of trick yourself a little bit into, all right, well, on to the next thing. And you can kind of get past that a little bit. It's a trick, but it does work to an extent of helping you get past it and move on. But so there's a topic that has come up a lot over the course of seeing posts on LinkedIn, seeing people complain about the process, complain about the job market. And it's kind of the terms of blaming companies for behaving poorly. And it's true. Companies are acting different than they did even 5 years ago. 5 years ago, you would at least get an automated rejection. And nowadays, silence has become the new rejection. If you just never hear from them, that's a no. And that's just the way it goes. Whether that be if you did an interview or you just applied, a lot of times they're not even going to take the time to tell you they didn't choose you. But when we first met, one of the first things we talked about was you mentioned to me that back in 2020, the roles were reversed. And I had not thought of that, but I'll let you go into that a little bit because I'll butcher it if I try to say it. But,
Yeah.
But can you say again what you told me that first time we met of what was happening in 2020 and then we can kind of discuss it a little further.
Yeah. So I would say it was more 2021 than 2020 because obviously we know what happened in 2020.
Sure.
And there was a mass hiring for IT professionals, right? Because everyone was going remote. Like within months, our professional environment changed drastically, right? And so they needed people to help support telecommuting. And we had candidates who had multiple offers, ghosted companies, ghosted recruiters, didn't ever get back to them, held, 2 or 3 offers in their hand while they were weighing it out and did not communicate. So they behaved pretty badly, right? You have recruiters hounding candidates, you have companies hounding candidates to be like, hey, did you take a look at our offer? And candidates were able to ask far above, market value for what their roles were. So there was like a hiring spree, right? Now we're seeing the opposite effect, right? Everyone's getting laid off. There's not enough jobs on the market. I shouldn't say that. There are jobs on the market, right? But there's just a surplus of professionals that are also on the market. And so now companies are in this, the tables have turned, right? Companies have an influx of applicants. They can't possibly get to every single person, right? So I think it's kind of like there's a peak, there's a valley, right? And it just depends on who's on which end of it. And it's the whole thing about taking rejection gracefully, right? If you go to a company and said, I haven't heard from you, this is unprofessional, how dare you guys not respond to any of your candidates that have interviewed or applied, or that's not going to get you anywhere, right? Same thing if the companies came to a candidate and said, hey, how dare you, how unprofessional, I can't believe you haven't accepted our offer yet or given us an answer, right? So it's kind of, it's twofold, right? At one point, one person's experiencing that, and the other point, the companies are experiencing that. So I think it all comes back to, handling rejection gracefully, handling multiple offers gracefully. That's a whole nother topic that I'm sure we could dive into. But how do you navigate, just that whole emotional roller coaster, right? It could be the highs of a candidate having 4 or 5 offers in hand and not really knowing which one to choose, and putting off the companies because they don't know what to say to them. And then companies who have, 10 to 20 amazing candidates and they can't possibly know who to choose from there. So they're in this, paradox of choice, right? They have just too many good options. They don't know who to go with. And so they end up sometimes not even making a decision, which is terrible, right? So, I think there's some interesting, dynamics to keep in mind. And like you said earlier about turning the camera around and looking at yourself, right? Put yourself in their shoes, understand. And I think a lot of HR professionals and folks who are going through the hiring process, they do the best that they can, but they are also responsible for other things besides hiring, right? So, and I think a lot of companies are also functioning on smaller teams that have to do more right now. And it's this valley we're in, right? But with every valley, there's going to be, a climb up and a peak. So it's cyclical. We just have to wait it out gracefully.
Right. And it's kind of one of those paradoxes that I get into because I'm a person that has deep empathy for a lot of people. That's what made me want to start this. It's what made me want to talk about this topic. But like you said, when I see somebody on LinkedIn blasting a company that maybe didn't act great, or their experience was poor, or, whatever the case may be, there's that two-sided effect that happens to me. The first is I have empathy for them because I know that they're hurting, that they were hoping for that job, or, they really liked that company. Maybe they went through a few interviews. That means they really want to work there. And the company maybe didn't handle it great, but then they're blasting them on LinkedIn. Well, digital footprint lasts. And those companies are going to know that you're talking about them, even if you don't mention them by name, especially if it's like the day after or the day of. If someone gets on there and sees you post this, clearly they know you're talking about them. So if you ever had any hope of working for them, you just probably ruined that by blasting them when maybe, yeah, they acted maybe not great to you, but maybe there was some reasons behind it that you don't know. And the poor HR person, maybe it was a one-person show and they were doing the best they could, and maybe they sent it out different than they meant to, or, whatever the case may be. But you just burned that bridge just like that.
Could you imagine companies blasting people on LinkedIn?
My gosh.
It's it's a whole thing about flipping the perspective. What if they blasted Jane Doe? We gave Jane Doe an offer 10 days or 10 weeks ago, and she still hasn't, responded. Don't work with that person. Like, it's
Or if they posted like, we were just in an interview, and can you believe what this candidate did during this interview? Here's what happened to me.
Exactly.
And that would be terrible because that person would know, like,
it was about them.
It's about them, and that, like, that can get out. And if you start, like, if you mention anything of, hey, I applied to XYZ company, and then someone may have seen them blast them and be like, were you the person that tried to kiss the interviewer or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And now you have like no recourse there. You're kind of like, yeah, that was me. And unfortunately that company just put you on blast and you got no shot. And yeah, it's a weird paradox that I find myself in this with doing this venture is I see these things on LinkedIn. I see that and blasting companies, and but the other thing that you see is, and we were talking about this, I think on Sunday, is I see people that have been out of work for a long time, which I have deep empathy for. And I'm going through it myself. I understand that that's tough, but then they're not changing anything. They're not, they're doing the definition of insanity and expecting something to change. And so there's that part of you that has like this deep empathy for them, but then it's also, why haven't you changed your strategy? And why haven't you thought of, something else to try or, whatever. And so it's a weird paradox that I find myself in sometimes when I read these things of, on one side, I want to give you a hug. And on the other side, I want to like shake you by the shoulders and say, you got to try something else. Like, wake up a little bit and try something else.
And to bring that back full circle to the original, to networking, right? Mm-hmm. I think that would be a beautiful opportunity to reach out to that person and say, hey, I see you've been doing this. Like, do you want to have a sounding board and we can talk about maybe different strategies? I'm going through the same thing, or, this is what has worked for me, and because you never know, what if that person, just needed that little uplift, and then wherever they land, what if they think about you and they say, oh, I remember that guy, Brad, when I was like at my lowest point, who really just came in and picked me up. And you know what? I know what he does now. We've gotten to know each other. I'm at this company ABC and they're hiring. I'm going to bring him over. Right. Mm-hmm. there's opportunities for that to happen. I mean, that's kind of like a hypothetical situation, but you never know, right?
Yeah, you never know. I mean, weirder things have happened.
Yes.
Like I've heard more odd stories of how people got their job or how they got connected to so-and-so. You know, I have a friend who's in a window cleaning business. He cleans windows and he does really well doing it. But through cleaning windows, he found out that there's such thing as house managers of wealthy people. Right. And he's a contractor that comes in and cleans windows for people. And, you know, we have the Oklahoma City Thunder here. We have other like, you know, professional golfers and people that make quite a bit of money. And just by doing what he did and listening to conversations, he was able to become a house manager of a really well-known like golf person and could get a few of the Thunder players. And it was all just because he just got to know them and was nice to them and was trustworthy. And they saw like, hey, he could help me manage this house while I'm not here, you know? And that's grown into, you know, as pretty much it can go as big as he wants it to go now, all because he was just doing what he's doing to pay the bills and he was listening. So stranger things have happened. Like there are stories all day long of people that find jobs in all different ways. But I love what you said. You got to be present. You got to, you know, don't check out. Just invest in the people that you're meeting. And it's easier said than done sometimes. I get it. But
and aim to give first. Like be the first to give. I think that is I think if you approach any scenario, and then this doesn't even have to just apply to networking, you know, just any scenario, if you're willing to give first, you know, serve first, I think that just opens up so many doors and opportunities for conversations, for relationships, for trust to build, and you know, doing it organically and authentically, because there is a whole, you know, different conversation about overgiving, right? To the point where you're giving, and you're feeling, I can't find my words today. You're giving, you know, you're giving unwillingly, right? So it doesn't feel good. There's some resentment, you know, that comes from you giving. So don't give to that point, right? Don't overexert yourself in that way, but give what you can wholeheartedly without any expectations of return. And yeah, I mean, just the things that'll come back is beautiful.
Yeah. And as we kind of land this, the other thing that kind of came to my mind with all that we've been talking about is whenever you do find that next opportunity and you're working, if someone comes to you and asks you to be a professional contact for them, it's important to pay that forward. Yeah. And remember that there were people who did that for you. And, you know, nothing is worse than trying to helping someone get something and then they get asked by somebody else to do that. And they're just like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
Right. So just remember that. And remember at some point you may be in this position that we're talking about where someone's coming to you and trying to get information from you, and pay that forward. You know, like it's important. I love thinking of the humanity of the entire situation of job candidates. They're human. They're trying. They've got families to feed. It really is it can be a scary time for a lot of people. When we talk about companies behaving badly, that's what hurts me so bad for them, is that they are human beings. But on the flip side, you're dealing with human beings that are working at a company and you have no idea what they're going through over the course of their day. And if it's a one-man band, they may be so overwhelmed that they're trying their best and they may want to get back to you, but it's just, they can't get to it or whatever, you know? And as this as it comes around, just remember, you were asking at one point, and at some point you may be asked, and to point it back. But like I said, Amy, we could talk forever. You've had to see my face a lot recently, and but I've enjoyed every bit of our conversation because it's just so cool to meet people that we think similarly, we think differently, we think, we have different experiences, and it's cool to just get a chance to have this with you. But kind of my last question is, if somebody came to you today and they just got let go and they're scared and they're worried about where they will be, what their situation could be, and they come to you and said, Amy, what would you suggest for me right now? What would be the thing you would tell them if they came to you?
Boy, that's tough. And you're putting me on the spot.
I know. I didn't write that in my outline. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
It just came to my mind, and I try to ask a similar question to somebody at the end.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate this, because the first thing that comes to mind is be really kind to yourself, first and foremost. Self-care, right? Because if you're not okay, then nothing else is going to be okay, right? So first two things, be really kind to yourself, take care of yourself, take a moment to feel all the emotions you're feeling, let them get through you, and then do a self-inventory of yourself, right? Your skills. If this is an opportunity to pivot, where would you go? Like, what would you do, right? To really reflect back on your time in that position, in that role. Did you enjoy it? Are you ready for the next step? Is this an opportunity to take the next step? And then once you do the self-inventory, then come up with a plan, right? And I've always heard the thing that hope is not a good plan. And although I agree with that, but I think hope is a good strategy, right? So your strategy is hope. So that allows you then to put a plan together. Because if you don't have action coupled with hope, then, I think it's a non-starter. But if you have hope with no action, or action with no hope, right, then it's also, you're kind of going to start to spiral. So I think it's that's what I would say. Take care of yourself, be kind to yourself, do a self-inventory, and then put together a plan. And be hopeful, be positive, because there's many people going through the same thing. You're not alone. And you may run into people who don't see the value of networking. They don't understand. They've never been through this before, right? They've been very lucky and got in with a company right out of college, and they're still at that company 20 years later. So they've never gone through this, right? And that's okay. They're not the right people. It's, what's the worst that could happen? They say no. Okay, no, move on. Next person, right? Thank you for confirming that you're not the right person. Let's move on to the next one. And you will meet like-minded people like Brad and myself, who are going to be more than happy to welcome you and chat through whatever issues you might be having, and remind you that you're not alone.
Yeah. I love that you say hope, and this may be completely random, but earlier today, I was watching an interview with a comedian. Her name is Leanne Morgan. Have you heard of Leanne Morgan?
I haven't.
Okay, so she is a grandmother. She's like 59, and she's a comedian. And she does a lot of jokes now about, menopause and being older and all these things. And they're really quite funny, even if you're not at that age. It's really wholesome comedy and all this. Well, to a lot of people, she is an overnight sensation, right? All of a sudden she blew up, and now she has a TV show on Netflix, and she has all these specials, and she sells out theaters and all these things. And everybody keeps asking her, what does it feel like to be an overnight success? And she always reminds people that she had been doing comedy for 25 years before anyone knew who she was. she wasn't selling out comedy clubs. She wasn't doing all these things. But in the back of her mind, she always had this voice in her head that was telling her, you're going to be in Hollywood someday. Like, you're going to be in movies. You're going to be in TV shows. And she had people option her for a TV show a while back, and it didn't work out because of a writer's strike and all kinds of things. And that hope that she had, to your point of hope, that hope that she had, that belief that she had that someday she would ultimately end up making a TV show like she is now and being a very popular comedian. And, she's living everything she dreamed of living now. But as she mentioned, the thing that's most captivating about this is that she realized at one point that if she would have gotten the TV show back in the day, when her kids were young and all of these things, she said, I wasn't ready for this back then. I wanted to take care of my kids. I wanted to see them grow up. I wanted to do these things. And in a lot of ways, she got a chance to do both. And it was all from that self-belief of, I'm going to eventually crack through. And I just think that's so cool. And that's so, even if you don't like her comedy and you don't want to hear about menopause and you don't want to hear about, an older lady wearing a girdle and whatever else, if you don't like her comedy, fine. But her story is inspirational in the fact that she just stuck with it. And the moment that she was about to say, okay, this isn't going to happen for me, that's when she blew up. That's when she had a clip that go viral. And that's when suddenly she started selling out comedy clubs and became what she is now. And I just think that's so cool. And I think it's great that you said, hold on to the hope, because you're going through something now. You're unemployed. You're scared. You don't know if you're ever going to get a job again. Sometimes it feels like you're not, but you have no idea what's on the horizon. And you just got to have hope that something better is coming down the road that you can aspire to, say, it's coming, and just kind of, even if it's that delusionally confident thing of it's coming.
It's coming. Yeah.
That right company is out there, and I'm going to find them. Yep. And they're going to want me, and I'm going to want them, and I'm going to thrive,
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think that hope that keeps you driving forward. Like, no matter what you do, just continue to put one foot in front of the other. Keep that hope alive, but keep putting one foot in front of the other, and eventually you will arrive at your destination. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that.
Well, Amy, I can't thank you enough for your time.
Yeah.
And for being willing to come on here and talk about this networking piece. And we've joked about it, but I'm serious now. Like, I think we have a lot that we can cover, because we've talked about all kinds of things that we've all experienced. And there's so many experiences that people may think they're the only one that has experienced this, but they're not. And that, again, that hope of, okay, I'm not the only one, and I'm going to do fine is great. So I can't thank you enough for your time. And I'm sure we'll be talking a lot down
very
the road.
Soon. Yeah. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And again, thank you for creating this, because I think it's a wonderful place for people to go, especially if they're going through this path right now, right? They're in this phase of their life. I think it's great to know that they have a place that they can go just to maybe be reminded of things that they knew, but because they're in a state of panic or, high emotions, it's hard to remember everything. So it's nice to have a place like a hub to return to just hear that, okay, validation, I'm not alone. Okay, yes, I know all these things. And it's a good reminder, because nothing that we're talking about is, new information. It's just good reminders and, good kind of touch points and validation points, again, of what you thought you knew, and maybe even trying it and it hasn't working, but validating that it does work. You just have to keep putting one foot for the other.
For sure.
So thank you for creating this.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, and we'll see you soon.
Okay. We'll talk soon.
Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Job Seeker's Journey podcast. I would like to thank Amy for coming on, for becoming a friend, for being who you are, and just being the all-around good person that everyone can hear that you are. So thank you, Amy. This podcast is something that I have thoroughly enjoyed throughout the course of this year. I started it back in January. I had the idea back in 2024 as I was starting my job search journey. It literally is the definition of labor of love. I get nothing from it. I get no income. I have no sponsors. I am simply wanting to help encourage others that are going through this journey, as well as provide useful information to hopefully help them find that next job opportunity. And at the end of each episode, I get on here and I ask you to send to someone who's going through a job search and who may be struggling. And I ask you to rate and review, and I get very little to no response from that. So all I'll say is thank you. If you hit that play button, it's an honor for you to have gotten this far. I hope you hear the gratitude in my voice. This is not an upset plea. But I do ask, if you do know someone and you have listened to an episode, then you know that that may help them, whether it be a mental health one, something practical. But that'll do it for this episode of the Job Seeker's Journey, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.